Hey guys, welcome back to Daniel's Tech World here on YouTube. My name is Daniel Rosehill and I'm going to continue today with my series of videos about how to get Vinci Resolve working, how to work with it on a Linux distro such as Ubuntu, although CentOS is actually the distro that Blackmagic kind of references as their sort of standard Linux distro in their documentation. But from everything I've seen so far, everything here in supported formats and codecs applies equally to Ubuntu as it does to CentOS, or I presume other Linux distros. So basically Blackmagic put these out periodically. They're called supported formatting codecs. I found these by typing into Google Vinci Resolve supported codecs until I found the actually current one. This is, you can see up in the top left here, this particular document is for Vinci Resolve 18. I can see that through the file name, but just be aware that they put these out for every new edition of DaVinci. So there are ones floating about on the internet for DVR 15 and 16. So if you're watching this a year in the future from when I record this and there's DaVinci 20, look for the DaVinci 20 supported format and codecs guide. But this is, as I time of recording this is our latest and greatest one. I'll put a link in the description to it, and they improve the appearance slightly every time they put these out, but the basic premise remains the same. They have a section for Mac, a section for Windows, and a section for Linux. And as I mentioned, they're using CentOS 7.3 as their kind of surrogate for Linux. And then within each operating system, they're going to give you video miscellaneous, still in sequence formats, and audio. Now, the one that people, the vast majority of users are going to care about will be the video and the audio codecs, because that's where it's different on Linux than it is on Windows. You'll import, let's say in my situation with my Canon camcorder, an MP4 with shot in with a H.264 video codec, but AAC audio, and you'll import those, and you'll see that the audio won't appear in DaVinci. You won't be able to see the waveforms. There will be no audio. And in order to fix that, you're going to have to see, well, okay, the reason that's not working is firstly, AAC isn't a supported audio codec. So what can I do in transcoding to change it to a supported audio codec? And if you read these, it'll be all clear. So because this video is going to focus on Linux specifically, I'm going to just jump into a CentOS 7.3 section, which begins on page 11. And just to explain, if it's your first time looking at this document from Blackmagic, they formatted them all the same, but this is how they're laid out. Firstly, we have on the left column the format. Then we have the file extension, which is also known as the container. I'm going to skip through alpha exports and codec pass-through because I can't remember what they are, and for basic support, the one you're really interested in is decoding, right? So DaVinci needs to take in a certain format, and in order to be able to do that, it's got to decode, and encoding is what you can put out of DaVinci in. But most people are going to be rendering into sort of a few standard formats, right? I don't think that most people deliver their projects in, for instance, DNX HD as the format. I could be mistaken about that, but basically, for the purpose of the first question of, well, what's going to work? What kind of clips can I import? Can I get the video? Can I get the audio? You're looking at format, file extension, and under decode is going to list the actual codecs, right? So just to take an example, MOV type files that are commonly associated with Canon, or MXF OP1A type files, the supported codecs are XFAVC. So this is useful to know if you own a Canon camcorder and you have the option to shoot in the XFAVC video codec. Well, that's going to be supported, right? It'll be able to decode and work in Linux in DaVinci. Let's find an example of something that's not supported. They use the hyphen dashes like this when to indicate that you can't do something, like, right? There's no encode support for XFAVC. Here's one, right? Nikon RAW file extension NEV. No supported codecs for decoding, no supported codecs for encoding. I don't know if it's the same on Windows and Mac, but you can see an example of something that's not going to work. So if you're in the situation that you have a Nikon camcorder, you're shooting in RAW and it's producing this NEV file, you're not going to be able to just use them straight out of the box in DaVinci Resolve. If you're using Linux, you're going to need to figure out how to transcode them first into something that will be usable. And so on and so forth. We have a mixture of the common ones like XAVC from Sony, the XDCam, and DaVinci being a very professionally oriented video editor. These are the more, so I think there's a mixture here of supported codecs for more casual users and for professional users. For instance, in the MPEG wrapper, looking at the MOV file extension, the decode codec support is for MPEG2, MPEG4, and MPEG IMX variants. Now let's come down to audio. And just a quick note for MKV, there's the video codec supported within files in the MKV format is going to be H.264, H.265, and VP9. I'm not familiar with VP9, but H.264 and H.265. And this is actually a point of difference between the free and paid version of DaVinci on Linux. In the free version, DaVinci Resolve, I believe H.264 and H.265 are not supported, certainly within the MP4 file extension. When I paid to upgrade to DaVinci Resolve Studio, they started working. So there are differences even within free and paid in Linux. Going to step over still and sequence formats because, as I mentioned, I think the vast majority of people using DaVinci for video editing are just doing video and audio. But if you want to know what still and sequence formats can be worked with, there you go. All right, audio, next important thing. So we have here, it's not actually a huge list. This is the last page of the document, and it's page 14 of 14. You can see WAV, AIFF, MP3, AAC, FLAC, audio embedded in video containers within your MOV, MXF, R3D, MP4, AVI, MOV, IMF audio, Opus audio within MOV and MP4, and AC3. So let's look at what is supported for, let's again focus on decoding. So starting with WAV, PCM 16, 24, 32-bit, supported. That's uncompressed audio. MP3 supported with constant bitrate. And then AAC not supported, right? That's how they denote not support, is the hyphen. Very, very important. If your camcorder, camera, whatever you're shooting with, records video, probably the video codec will be supported. But if you've an AAC will not be supported. And that's the case on my Canon camcorder. The audio is AAC on the basic setting and PCM 4-channel on the pro setting. So I need to make sure I use the pro setting because you can use the basic and transcode, but if you want to save yourself work in transcoding, you want to be able to just get the clips off your camera and dump them straight into DaVinci for editing, then you're going to need to have you be shooting in audio and video codecs that are supported out of the box. And again, as we can see here, WAV, yes. MP3, yes. AAC, no. FLAC, yes. Audio embedded in video containers, yes. And then finally AC3, and that's important to know because when I was having trouble getting AAC and I was like, what can I transcode the audio to that'll work in Linux, someone suggested AC3, and unsurprisingly it didn't work because AC3 as an audio codec is also not supported. If you're running DaVinci Resolve, DaVinci 18, and you're hoping to use it with Linux, I hope this walkthrough has been useful. I'll put a link in the description, and print and download this. Definitely worth printing this document and having it for your own reference.